Genesis has been pushing the envelope when it comes to car design, but why? And how's the world taking it? That's the subject of this episode of AutoComplete, and to explore the subject, I'm talking to Roadshow's chief opinion haver on all things automotive design, as well as our social media maven, Mr. Daniel Golson. When Genesis first spun off of Hyundai, it seemed less concerned with doing its own thing than with just fitting in with the stuff from Europe. Fast forward a few years, and now the Koreans have gone way out into uncharted waters. They're kind of blazing new trails. Why do you think that's happening?
I think part of it is that they're finally at the point where Genesis has its own full line of products out, and it's not cars that had been in development as Hyundai's, because the second gen G80 even was a Hyundai when it first came out, before the Genesis brand actually launched. And I think that now that they're established, okay, here's what our brand is like, here's what we want it to do, they can kind of start to have fun, especially because these new cars that are coming out will have been designed and engineered 2, 3, 4+ years ago. Mm-hmm. So this is something that they've been working to ever since they first launched the brand.
You know, as you said, these are Genesis specific models. I mean, the G90, the GV80, and now the G80. They're obviously really unique looking. They have a ton of pretty wild design touches, from the giant grille to the side marker lights and stuff. Which of these design features do you think stands out the most, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing? And what exactly do you think that the designer is trying to convey by including them? Because it's all stuff that you don't really see on other cars.
I think one of my favorite things about the G80 and the GV80 is the super thin LED lights. I've been waiting ever since LED light technology started getting better and better for a brand to come out and do something that's just super slick and minimal like this, because it wasn't, maybe the 90s was the last time that we could have super slim headlights. And now we're finally at a point where that can happen again. So I really like all the lighting elements, how it's carried through in I wouldn't even call them fake fender vents, the trim on the fenders. I also think Genesis has done a really good job with the surfacing of the new cars. You have these really, really crisp, tight lines that start at the front and go all the way to the rear of the car. There's really interesting scalloping at the rear end, especially on the G80. The whole trunk lid is just pretty wild. I like that Genesis just in general is kind of pushing the envelope and making these really standout, design-centric cars.
Yeah,
because I think that the segments that they're entering into have been kind of missing that. Sure, we had the Bangle era BMWs were pretty wild, and then the Mercedes CLS comes out, and that was pretty crazy, and maybe the original X6. But for the most part, luxury car design has been fairly staid and has never really taken risks, at least in terms of a design language overall. So right. I really like that Genesis is coming in also as a brand new brand to come in and say, hey, we're going to do crazy stuff. We don't care if the world might not be ready for it yet, but this is what we want, what we think luxury is in the future. One
of the things that a lot of people in our industry are pretty excited about, you and I included, I think, is the return of color to vehicle interiors. I mean, forever and ever, it was black, beige, gray, and then, maybe you'd get a red if you were lucky. But the G80 and the GV80 in particular offer some pretty non-standard color options. Why do you think that things are kind of moving in this direction? And what is your favorite color interior that Genesis currently offers?
Well, this is something that I've actually recently talked to some Hyundai and Genesis designers about, is the use of color in interiors. And it's just a way to differentiate themselves on one hand. It's the GV80 has this incredible two-tone forest green and chocolatey brown interior, and no one is doing green interiors like that. That is just not a typical color, or even an atypical color. There just aren't any other cars on the market with green. And they just see it as a way to differentiate themselves, and are pulling from fashion trends and architecture trends and design trends in general to say, hey, what are the color palettes that are trendy right now and that people want to see? And I think one thing I really appreciate about the colored interiors, I know that with the GV80, it's like this with the green and brown, and I'm sure that the G80's blue and brown is the same way. When you get in these crazy color interiors of the Genesis cars, It's not like, oh, you have green seats and a little bit of green trim on the doors and that's it. No, the entire interior is either green or brown. The steering wheel matches, the plastic in the door jambs matches, all the plastic surrounds in the trunk area, the seat switches, the seatbelt little outlet buckle things are matching all the other plastics. It's just like they really spent a lot of time with attention to detail and just covered everything in color, which is really, really amazing, I think.
And then kind of touching on what you were saying about Genesis really following trends, do you think that this design language, this really kind of aggressive and bold styling is going to ultimately bring more people to the brand? Or do you feel like it's maybe more of a move to just differentiate it from, the Mercedes, the BMWs and Audis of the world? And then, do you feel like this is going to last for more than a generation?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely going to bring more people to the brand. I mean, we've even seen this, seeing the GV80 most recently at the Chicago Auto Show. It has just been absolutely swarmed by people. Lots of non-auto industry people are getting very excited about what the hell is this new car that we've never heard of that looks so cool. And I think it's definitely not just a we need to just do something to make people notice us kind of move. I think this genuinely is what the Genesis designers want to be putting out and thinks is what customers want right now. And I think even if this current Genesis design language with the double headlights and the coupe-like rear on the G80 and all that kind of thing, even if this design language doesn't last more than a generation, I think that's fine as long as they continue to do unique things.
Sure.
And Genesis right now, they're establishing a design language, but we could see them in a few years when they're doing facelifts or updates or even new models start to branch off even more and do even more interesting things.
That's it for this episode of Roadshow's AutoComplete. I've been Kyle Hyatt. You've been very patient. And I'd ask you to not only hit that subscribe button and the notification buttons if you dig what we're doing, but feel free to chime in the comments section and let us know what you'd like to hear us cover next.